we want President Trump to be successful. He's not going to be because he's an idiot
Yeah.
and the things he's doing. He's not going to be, but that's not because we don't want to help. And
Yeah.
it's not because we're not going to be there or try and make it work. Joe Biden didn't have that. That
Exactly.
everything they did was to go against him.
Hey everyone, so as you may or may not be aware, Democrats have been searching for the so-called liberal Joe Rogan. Now, they think they found it in Jaime Harrison, who launched the first episode of his podcast with a very special guest, that is Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate during the 2024 presidential election. So the two men sat down for a little bit less than an hour and did their best performance of relatability and liberal masculinity, whatever that means. And it's quite entertaining to watch, so let's take a look.
I do think there's a responsibility for us to tell us, all right, what's the plan to get out of this?
Yeah.
What's the plan to do something?
Well, and I think that goes to where do you think the Democratic Party is right now? And, you know, Governor, I was talking with folks on my team the other day, and I said, I got two young kids at home, 10 and 6, and we watch a lot of Winnie the Pooh. And in Winnie the Pooh, you know, Democrats are a donkey, but we are sure as hell are Eeyore most of the time.
Yeah.
It is a woe is me party, and
Yeah, I think
everything
they're-
is dark and dim. And the Republicans remind me of Tigger. Tigger will fuck everything up. I mean, he will
Yeah.
just mess it all up, but never take any ownership of it.
Yeah.
Like still hopeful and joyful and bouncing around and messing other things up. Like, how do we get out of being Eeyore,
Yeah.
right?
I never thought of that analogy, but it is pretty apt. I've been telling, you know,
So you can practically see the wheels spinning in real time as Walz attempts to respond to and complement this totally inane analogy. I mean, I understand he's trying to keep the tone casual, but still, you know, this is the sort of hard-hitting analysis we've come to expect from establishment Democrats. On the other hand, yes, their party is certainly gloomy, and I have to wonder if that's because it's composed of a lot of people with mental troubles. This is not just speculation or name-calling. I mean, a recent Pew poll got a lot of attention for suggesting that young liberal women are a very unhappy cohort in comparison to their conservative peers of either sex, and even in comparison to their male liberal peers.
I use this analogy. We heard a woman in Georgia say, you know, we're like deer in the headlights, cars coming at us, and we just stand there till we get run over. Look, I know you, your family, you poured your heart and soul into this. And the most difficult job is trying to build party, because one of the things that we value so much is we value that big tent. We value those individual voices. We value that individuality. I'll say this about Republicans. They'll put on the same uniforms, spout the same stuff, and walk in the same line a little bit. That doesn't get us anywhere. But I think getting back to what you're saying is
So maybe once upon a time, Walz's analysis might have been correct, that liberals were these free thinkers, a group of people who just didn't fit in with the mainstream, and conservatives were interested in conserving. But obviously, when you think of the modern ideology with the most costly membership fees, let's say, that would be liberals. I mean, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to say or even think. You have to toe a very careful line, whereas conservatism has sort of become a catch-all for anyone who feels maligned by mainstream liberalism. You're going to get highly religious people, you're going to get former self-identified liberals who just care about free speech, a lot of different people. And to my point about liberalism being stuffy and restrictive, the Dems are putting on this highly produced podcast to appeal to men, which is basically a poor imitation of what Joe Rogan did. Joe Rogan, I'm fairly certain, did not set out with any overt political mission. He just wanted to talk to people that he found interesting, and he was good at it. Now, I'm skeptical that Harrison is going to have the same success, but I guess that remains to be seen. But let's turn to their thoughts on the last election and what Kamala Harris did right and maybe what she did wrong.
it was about people feeling like they had a say in this, like they could be different, like we can chart our own future.
Well, my question, Governor, is though we had all of that
Yeah.
unique energy, and I felt like you were loose. I felt the VP was loose in a
Yeah.
way that she normally isn't, right? Like, because She's she's very regimented, but she's very sharp. Like she's straight to the point. But there was that joy was so. What happened?
So, I mean, there's people got to tell the story, and they're going to tell it from different angles. But you're right about this. Speaking of the vice president, I knew the vice president. She was the vice president. It was a privilege to be with her, but I got to know her a little bit. And I tell the story. One of the first times I was with her and her husband, it was my wife and I, and we went into a school in Savannah, Georgia, and we were driving down the little roads to get to Savannah. It's kind of out there, you're not just in Atlanta, and little kids on the side of the road with signs or whatever, and you could feel it. And she didn't, and she was very careful not to embrace the cultural moment of what she was in. But I remember speaking about how loose she was and how good she was. We went in.
So both men are adamant that Kamala was an extraordinarily loose candidate. And to that I say, you probably know her better than I do. But Harrison's perception is also that Kamala was straight to the point and sharp. Now, I'm not sure what sort of remarks Kamala was giving behind the scenes, but certainly to the public, she tended to serve up word salads. I mean, when you try to think of a Kamala Harris quote, the big lines that come to mind are the coconut tree, transnational criminal organizations, Venn diagrams, and Russia being a big country and Ukraine being a smaller country, which, in fairness, is a technically correct statement.
The cheerleaders were there and the football team was in the back. And then we were going to do some, kind of take some questions from the kids or whatever. And just out of the blue, the vice president says, "Oh, yeah, I was a band kid." I'm like, "What? You got to tell people you're when you're a band kid, you're a band kid."
You're a band
and
kid.
I said, as a teacher,
well,
I know
that. Well, you can tell when she was down here in the drum line. Yeah,
you
knew
could
she
see
was
the band kids. The band kids were, relating to her, and it was that very personal thing. And I just think we're going to have to try and understand. And this is, I don't have the answer, and I may be on the wrong thing. What Donald Trump does so well is identify issues with people. He doesn't do a damn thing to fix them, and then he exploits them, and then he turns it into fear, and he takes up a massive amount of bandwidth.
Yes, I'm sure many of us remember those videos and GIFs that came out of Kamala Harris joyfully dancing in a drum line. I may be alone in this, but I suspect I'm not, since Donald Trump won the election after all. But relatability is not a particularly important quality in a candidate for me. I mean, there's this idea that, you should be able to have a beer with them, or in Kamala's case, you should be able to dance in a drum line with them. But Donald Trump is obviously very wealthy, very famous, of a different sex and generation than myself. And none of that mattered to me when I was considering who I would cast my vote for. And it also didn't matter to millions of other Americans. Now, Walz can't praise Trump without getting some digs in at the same time, but one thing it would be pretty tough to spin would be Trump basically shutting down illegal entries at the southern border immediately after taking office. But of course, Walz appears to have a different memory about the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration. So let's hear his thoughts on that.
One of the things that right now is a big talk about the president and the vice president. What is your assessment? Like, if you had to write the looking at history in terms of the Biden-Harris administration, what's your assessment of the Biden-Harris administration?
Yeah, the competency of doing what I think, history will be clear. Those of us who aren't biased where they're at, and I don't think I am on this. I'm just where things were at. Pulling us through COVID, which was life and death.
Yeah.
The change from Trump bungling it to getting the support we needed, keeping people alive, and then bringing us all the way basically to the soft landing that every economist and every other country in the world said wasn't possible, whether it's Japan, Great Britain, Germany, didn't matter. And they did it with the grace and dignity, and did it against a backdrop of a January 6th coup, the corruption of a Trump administration, and them constantly being there, and did that. So look, I know there's the books being written and all of this or whatever. You can debate all of that, but the presidency that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ran saved lives, adhered to the principles that made America great, lifted folks up, and did it with dignity.
Well, and they did.
while some of the books being written would suggest it was less of a Joe Biden presidency and more of a Joe Biden's senior aides or assistants presidency. I mean, Original Sin, which I think Walz may be referring to here in very vague terms, details some pretty concerning anecdotes about Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Now, a few recent articles in the New York Times gave us some more insight into the use of the auto pen, but they provoked more questions than answers, at least for me. I mean, apparently they had this system where Biden gave oral instructions to senior aides, and then those aides related what he said to people who weren't in the meeting, who would then write up a blurb of his remarks to be sent to the woman who ran the auto pen. Given the apparent lapses in memory and coherence that we've seen Biden have very publicly, I think a lot of people are concerned about the fidelity of that transfer system.
A 50-50 Senate on a good day and a less than a 5-seat majority in the House.
That's right.
I mean, when you think about
it's impossible,
almost really, impossible. I mean, particularly those of us who were there during the Obama days, again, with the 60 vote in the U.S. Senate, and when you compare the two, I mean, it's amazing what they were able to accomplish.
And this is one I don't have this figured out yet, though. But the Republicans, they do not want us to succeed.
No,
and they were willing to bring the country down. And that, I would say, we want President Trump to be successful. He's not going to be because he's an idiot and the things he's doing. He's not going to be, but that's not because we don't want to help. And it's not because we're not going to be there or try and make it work. Joe Biden didn't have that. Everything they did was to go against him. We as Democrats are going to have to figure out, how do we protect our institutions? How do we work for the good of the American people, but recognize these are not good actors?
No,
they are not. They are not interested in, they're not interested in a bipartisan solution to things. They are just interested in tearing down. And I've been saying it,
So I'm not sure what sort of support Walz is referring to here. I mean, is he thinking about Democrats like Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles? Bass is basically an open defiance of Trump's homeland security plans, most centrally deporting illegal aliens in her city. But calls to abolish ICE or statements that you are not going to cooperate with them have basically become the norm for Democrats. Now, Walz is also saying two conflicting things here. He says that he and other Democrats actually want Trump to succeed. But on the other hand, he says that Trump is part of a coalition of bad actors who don't have the country's best interests in mind. So if that were the case, why would he want Trump to succeed in his aims? Well, maybe his definition of success would be simply adopting the Democrats' platform. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Have Democrats found their new Joe Rogan? Did you think Kamala Harris was loose? Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.